What is up, cheeseheads? Welcome back to another episode of BAM GPG. So, Bryson, Green Bay Packers, they officially added Bobby Babich
Mhm.
to the coaching carousel today, right? He's a defensive backs, pass game focused type of coordinator. He's going to be under the new defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon. You
Yeah,
know, a little bit about Babich here, Bryson. He comes over with a pretty extensive NFL resume. Most notable time was his kind of tenure there in Buffalo, where he spent nearly a decade as within their defensive staff. Right, he kind of made his way throughout the ranks there. Most recently, did serve as a defensive coordinator
yeah,
there in Buffalo.
not the most exciting hire, but I'm kind of excited about it because he's a defensive coordinator. He should be good with DBs.
Yeah, and Buffalo, they fired their head coach at the end of the year there, so you knew there were going to be some changes
Yeah,
within their staff there. So lucky to have him there as kind of the pass game coordinator for Green Bay there. A little bit more on Babich here, Bryson.
yeah,
Under his defense there at Buffalo, they did finish in the top 10 passing defense multiple seasons there. Buffalo ranked in the top 5 opponent passer rating for several years that he coached the secondary there in Buffalo. And the defense with him, consistently finished, the top 10 in points allowed from 2019 to 2023. And he helped, really develop kind of a high level defensive back scheme that was really built around communication with the players, zone discipline, and versatility, right?
yeah. And when somebody's in the top 10, that's a good sign.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like
So
when a defensive coordinator gets in the top 10, that's a good sign.
100%,
Yeah,
right? And his stint, Bryson, as a full defensive coordinator in Buffalo, that may have some mixed reviews here, especially amongst Buffalo fans. I'm sure there's some mixed reviews there, but his strongest reputation in this league as a coach is developing defensive backs, right? And a coach who truly does understand how to kind of structure pass coverage and concepts to really limit those explosive plays, right? This is important for the Green Bay Packers, more especially after losing, key staff members to Miami. You figured some of them would fall halfway out there this offseason as the Packers are transitioning to a new system with Gannon. And certainly, our cornerbacks they weren't our strong point last year at all, Bryson. So
yeah,
having a kind of a defensive mind in there that is his kind of strong point, that is his niche, it's only going to make the Packers better.
yeah.
Yep. So a little bit more on Babchip. What's he going to bring to Green Bay, Bryson? So Babich, you know, if you think about it, he really brings to the table a lot of experience and structure, right? Um, he's a younger guy, up and coming. He's made his way through the ranks there in Buffalo. His defense, historically rely heavily on, kind of split safety looks, kind of pattern matching zones there in the secondary and disguising coverages pre-snap, right? Babich, he spent years, Bryson, coaching inside of those same kind of principles, which should help the Packers defense as they get up to speed faster, right? They're going to be under a new system with Gannon, runs those type of concepts. So his knowledge of those concepts is going to help Green Bay's young defense get up to speed better and learn this new system with Gannon as they transition away from
Yeah,
Halfley, right?
yeah,
So, as I mentioned, Bryson, this system, it's especially big for a secondary in Green Bay that really doesn't have a lot of old veterans, but more so the younger talent. There, you talk about McKinney, you talk about Evan Williams, even Valentine, you talk about him, Nixon. If you want to throw him into the mix, I still hope Green Bay moves on from him this offseason. But, you know, again, a safety group that's anchored by Evan Williams, anchored by Xavier McKinney and Javon Bullard, right? They're still developing, right? They're getting better and better every year. And Babbitt's background should help tighten that communication back there, improve some of the eye discipline back there in the secondary, and reduce some of the busted coverage that you really saw Green Bay kind of get exposed with this year at times.
mhm,
So again, this look, it feels like kind of. it's kind of like a quiet but smart hire for the Green Bay Packers. It's not flashy by any means, but potentially it can be very, very impactful for the
Well,
Packers.
yeah, and, I feel like we got some young corners, well, some young corners and some that need to go, and some good and young safeties, so I think he can develop some of those young corners
Yeah, I'm
and
excited
the
about it.
safeties.
I
Yeah,
am 100% excited about this right here,
yeah,
and you should too if you're a Packer fan. It's been one of our weaknesses over the past couple of years, even under Halfley's defense, is that passing game. So getting a guy in there that can develop some young talent, improve that communication, improve some of those zone, the knowledge, right, of what Gannon's going to bring there. If he can help bridge that gap to some of these younger players and help them understand the concepts, the schemes, it's only going to make Green Bay better, right? And want to transition into free agency a little bit, Bryson. We'll get more in depth into free agency
yeah,
as we get into it with the Green Bay Packers here. But, I would expect that the Packers this offseason, they're going to be a little more selective on who they go out and target in free agency rather than being aggressive this year. This, front office, consistently, they've shown that they prefer to target, kind of, you know, those they're more targeted to those veteran signings, right? Some of the guys that can go in there and bring ski or that really fit their system, I guess is what I'm trying to get at here,
yeah,
Bryson.
yeah.
The short-term deals outside of Micah Parsons last year, that was an anomaly. That was more of a trade than free agency, but really looking for players that are going to fit Gannon's system, right? Rather than the big names, flashy players.
Well, yeah, I think, there's 3 positions, like 2 or 3 positions on defense. I think there's actually 2 positions on defense that we need. We need cornerbacks and some D lineman help
Yeah,
to stuff the run.
100% agree. Yeah, 100%. You need to address the defensive backs. Get somebody in there that's going, again, doesn't have to be the big splashy name. You need to bring somebody in.
Jamaldi.
Yeah, somebody you can bring in that can make an impact who fits the system that Gannon's going to be running. And I think you're probably going to want to add a little bit of linebacker depth
Yep.
too, especially with the way Gannon runs his defense. You need to have smart IQ type of guys there. So you're going to need some linebacker depth. The linebackers, they're going to have to be able to coverage too. So you need those athletic linebackers in there. And then, kind of flipping the page to the offensive side of the ball, Bryson, Green Bay is going to have to add some line depth this year. Not necessarily starters, right? Although it would be nice to shore up some of the spots. Yeah, I got it. But you're going to need some reliable swing guys. What is, one thing we learned this year, there's going to be injuries amongst the offensive line, defensive line.
Yeah,
It's great to have depth.
I feel like we will also get some in the draft too.
I agree. Yeah, the draft, that's where the Green Bay Packers need to make their biggest impact, right? Um, we don't have a first round pick,
Yeah.
which is totally fine. Green Bay hasn't drafted well in the first round. Not an excuse, but if we get Micah Parsons, they can have our first round pick. So,
Yeah.
but in the draft, early round priorities, for the Packers, I would expect to, look at cornerback, right? Somebody that can come in as a long term answer and provide some competition early next season and offensive line tackle, interior offensive line, especially, depending on how the board falls, I would look for Green Bay to attack that early in the draft. And then again, defensive line, you can never have enough big bodies, especially the pass rush depth, right? The interior pressure. I think you
Yeah.
need to address that early in the draft as
Yeah.
well.
What I think we should do is take a corner second round, a D lineman third round, and then a line in the fourth and fifth round.
Yes. Yep. And I don't anticipate Green Bay moving up at all,
Yeah.
right? That's usually not our MO there in Green Bay. I think Green Bay's going to stay patient, stay put, and they're just going to stack across multiple positions and start to add some depth to some of these key positions. Given the coaching changes, especially on the defensive side of the ball, be surprised if Green Bay goes and, targets the high IQ defenders in this year's draft, right? Guys who can process quickly and execute complex coverages, right? Because that's what Gannon's going to need to fit his defense. So just to wrap this up here, Bryson, again, we'll cover more as we get into the offseason, start to look at some of the defensive players. Again, not necessarily just the flashy names, but guys that can come in and fit the system for the Packers, right? So, again, the Packers, they're continuing to quietly build this coaching staff this offseason, especially with Halfley's departure, with experienced voices, right? They're getting guys, I mean, they have two defensive coordinators essentially on the defensive side of the ball. So again, that's highlighted by the new hire Rich Gannon, or by the new hire Jonathan Gannon, and then Bobby Babich was just added. I think today the news is broke on that.
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
going to help shape the secondary for Green Bay, especially under Gannon's defense, as I had mentioned. And free agency, Bryson, um,
Mhm.
it's something that's going to be measured, right? In the draft, once that comes again, Green Bay, they're positioned to make, I don't think they're going to move up. So I think Green Bay's just kind of positioned to stay put and draft where they are.
Well,
Possibly you could trade down and stack some third and fourth round picks if you wanted to.
we're always the best in the second round now, so
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
That's a Green Bay. That's where we tend to cook the most. You're 100% right there. So that's all we have for today's
Yep.
Packers update here, Bryson. Hope everyone enjoyed it. Make sure you like, subscribe, and we'll be back more with some off-season breakdown as we start to get into it here. And no football this weekend, Bryson.
Yep.
So as always,
Let's
it's
go, Pack, go.